Greetings and welcome to Dance Africana Dance Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lindsay Gary. Powered by Dance Africana Dance Podcast highlights the African dance tradition from Houston, Texas to the African continent. Its episodes specifically celebrate Black dance artists of the past, present, and future, the history of Black dance in Texas, and African and diasporic dances from around the globe. Our Black Dance in Texas episodes are also a part of a larger oral history project to document the history of Black dance in the region. On today's episode, which I'm super excited about, as I always am, we'll be discussing and exploring Black dance in Louisiana, our neighbor. And our guest today will be sharing her artistic practice, work, and research around that theme. So we're joined by the brilliant Greer Mendy, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. Greer Mendy founded and directs Tekrema Center for Art and Culture, a cultural arts organization in New Orleans' 9th Ward, the lower 9th Ward. Tekrema's mission is to create a legacy of art and culture, artistic excellence, scholarly achievement, and community responsibility through the study, maintenance, development, and perseverance of African and African American art and culture. Its evolution is Tekrema Center for African Diasporic Cultural Literacy. Greer Mendy holds a Juris Doctor, yes, that's right, she is a JD, from Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge, a diploma from the National Institute of Trial Advocacy, and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science with a minor in music from Xavier University in New Orleans. I didn't know you had a minor in music. So you played the bassoon?
Yes.
Wow. She remains a licensed attorney, and her legal background includes a solid background in public housing and entertainment and art law. Greer Mendy is an independent scholar of African, Caribbean, and New Orleans culture, explicitly studying dance traditions, languages, and literature. She studied dance genres in Africa and the Caribbean, and she's the author of Black Dance in Louisiana. The reason why she's here today, Guardian of a Culture, which is an expose of the traditions, social, political environments, and naked appearances, a collection of essays, poems, and short stories addressing art and identity. She describes herself as a frontline warrior, which she is, and after over 40 years, she has learned to create art without apologies or excuses for not fitting into the social structures dictated by New Orleans' class structures or within the accepted and often demanded fallacies of historical romance. Ooh, let's get into it. She creates to announce. I'm that's the part right there. I mean, all of it, but that part, I was just having a conversation with somebody about that yesterday. She creates to announce the brilliance and humanity of Blackness. She believes that art should be held as a public trust for the benefit and service of communities. That service is foremost education and inspiration. So we are so glad to welcome you here. And let's go ahead and jump into this important, very important conversation. So first of all, wow, it's an honor.
Well, first of all, for me, wow, it's an honor. I'm just honored, and that introduction was just wonderful. So thank you, Lindsay. Thank you. I'm so honored.
Well, look, I'm reading your bio, so you're phenomenal. So, I want to start out talking about you. We learned a little bit about you and your work through your bio, but can we go back to the very beginning? Because I think that because your work is so embedded in how you grew up in New Orleans, you being a native of Louisiana, and the work that you're doing to preserve those cultures, to tell the truth around those cultures and the history, can you start off by talking about when you were first introduced to dance and how that happened in your earlier childhood?
Okay. I think it's easy because I'm from New Orleans, and in New Orleans, everyone dances. We dance socially. Even if you're not dancing, if you're just sitting there, you're expected to participate in the dance in some form or fashion. But in regards to being a dancer, as a child, I participated in the school dance teams from elementary school through junior high school. Not so much in high school because, I'm of that age where there was a period where there was something called the brain drain. And to a degree, it still occurs. But when I was younger, the brain drain was an effort to get the Black children from their Black schools who wouldn't be a threat, who would be maybe easily manipulated or acculturated to fit into certain schools that weren't Black. I'll just say that. So it wasn't about playing football or anything like that. Now you get a body drain, but I experienced the other type of drain. So I didn't have the dance in high school. But the minute I got to Xavier, I danced again. And so that's where it started.
Just wow. And I just want to clarify. So when you say the brain drain that occurred, are we talking about an integration situation, or is it something that was different than that?
No, we're talking about integration, and thank you very much for that. So if the schools were mandated to integrate, or if it was a private school, and they really, a lot of them, for instance, the school I attended, it was an effort to do the right thing, but maybe they wanted to have control over who would integrate, who would come in, and how they would receive these students that ordinarily wouldn't apply to the school for whatever reason. And I distinctly remember my parents when I got the invitation and I was like, yeah, I want to go, I want to go. And I distinctly remember my parents saying, but what about this school? And referring to the Black schools in the community. And, I didn't listen. No, I want to go, I want to do something new, I want to do something different. And I remember my parents saying, but why? But without saying why, without telling me why, just saying, no, I think we should just do this. So without leaving that alone, let's move to the dance. And then when you talk about how did the dance start, at the time that in my youth, and probably in a lot of Black neighborhoods or communities, I grew up at the height of Tina Turner. So you had to stop your homework when Tina Turner was on television. My parents said, Tina Turner's on television, come see. Come on, everybody, let's go. So that's how I grew up.
And that's so rich in so many different ways and levels, from, the immediate family, community, the schools, from, elementary to Xavier. Then also now you're factoring in the media, and how Tina Turner, like people, these kind of, not so close to home influence, but, still a Black woman, have impacted and just giving you this well-rounded experience as a young person is interesting. Even for me, like Tina Turner is one of my biggest inspirations. Growing up, I grew up after she was, rolling on the river originally, at least, with her music. I grew up listening to her, and I remember at the elementary school that I went to in pre-K, we were always performing songs by either Tina Turner or Motown. And so I remember like our class literally learned all the choreography to Tina Turner. And then, of course, the movie, the biopic, came out when I was, maybe 5 or 6. So just really always been fascinated by her. So yes, and rest in peace as well.
Right,
so
you had to stop everything for Tina Turner.
Just wow. I mean, it's not. I'm almost speechless thinking about her. So thank you for sharing that. And then I think it's also important that you talked about, like, before you were in school, that you were dancing at home because of your environment, because of your culture, the community you grew up in. And I think that's something I always try to highlight, because a lot of times as dancers who have been trained in a non-Black environment, sometimes we think that those things aren't valid initially. A lot of times it's like, oh, well, where did you start your training? It's like, oh, well, I started my training intentionally, right, as a dancer at a certain studio, but then leaving out what happened prior to, because that's also, even if it wasn't necessarily like an intentional decision, it's a part of that background that you have. So I appreciate that. I want to talk
Right.
about,
And
oh, go ahead.
and everyone knows, well, most people, I'm not going to say everyone, but if you live in New Orleans, even if your family didn't participate in the second lines, so therefore you saw dance, even if you didn't, if you were not a member of a social aid and pleasure club, you saw it. You saw it somewhere. Um, we end our weddings with dance, with everyone getting in the middle of the dance floor and dancing, and funerals, everything. So even at family gatherings, before our bounce tradition started, and now we know, because now we have access to the study and the traditions and what happens in Africa. At a family gathering, it was not unusual that there was a circle of people. And if it wasn't the adults dancing, it was the children dancing. And people came into that gathering, whether it was inside or out, and got in the middle of the circle and danced. And it was nothing. It was just what we did. It was just how we lived.
So powerful. And I'm glad you brought up the piece about Africa. Going back to a part of your bio with kind of the romanticization of Louisiana cultures, Creole culture, Black culture, um, especially in South Louisiana, a lot of our dance traditions can kind of get wrapped up into this French kind of Creole or kind of colonial perspective. And so the fact that you're connecting um, this to Africa is extremely powerful. Um, and I'm not going to say that you're the only one that does it. I'm not going to say that I'm the only one that does it, but it's not done enough that we contextualize who we are through dance, who we are, period, but through dance from that greater perspective. And obviously that's something that when I first met you, I sought you out for that reason. When I was doing my own research for my thesis in my MFA in dance, I came across your work, Black Dance in Louisiana, and found you literally I was
Thank
DMing you
you.
on Instagram because I was so moved by that, and it's important. And to be able to say, hey, we've been doing these things and we exist in this way, just how we are, and how that has a history, and that it's a continuum of something that was happening, in Africa and it's still happening there. So in other parts of the diaspora. So I think that is really why I wanted you here, because I think that your work is important because of the region it looks at, but also because of how it can be applied to so many other places. Somebody from California can be comparing or looking at crump within the African perspective, which I know has been done, especially in that film Rise. I'll never forget the imagery of the crump dancing, and they're like showing like side by side African dances on the continent that look almost exactly like crumping. So I know that it's being done, but it can be applied to so many different locales. So your work is really global in terms of reach, not just because of
Thank
what
you.
you're doing in Louisiana, but just the application of it to other populations. So I want to talk about that. What brought you to research Black dance in the way that you have, especially in Louisiana?
Well, dancers in Louisiana, particularly those of us who consider ourselves traditional dancers, we have for a very long time sought to compare what we do and to provide a rationale. And that rationale, to me, I'm listening to it. I'm beginning my research there, but I'm going further. So I'm going to just be honest and give the credit to us. us. I moved to Washington, D.C. after Hurricane Katrina because it made sense. Everything was devastated in New Orleans. I had 2 children at Howard University at the time. I enrolled in a dance class. I said, wow, I'm in DC. I'm going to take a class at Howard University. So I enrolled in a dance class and some other type classes, African studies classes. But the dance class, of course, you have to do your obligatory end of the semester research paper. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I'll do on the Black dance traditions in New Orleans. I present the paper. The professor, her name was Dr. Sherilyn Berriman Johnson, I think. She stopped me in my tracks. And very politely and very professionally, she told me that I needed to go back and do it again. It was wrong. And she told me all the reasons why it was wrong. In my mind, I quick, fast, and in a hurry went to, wow, who had a video camera? Who had a phone? Where am I getting this information from? It's not right. And it went back to the romanticism of what we do that has been fed us and that we accepted. Later on, I have a piece I could read and share with you if you'd like from the Naked Appearances. It's from an essay called Ode to New Orleans. And I'm talking about the dance traditions and our spiritual practices that we want to attribute to one thing. That thing you talk about, the colonialism and the French. And so we tend to simplify things by saying, oh, and this one particular group of people brought this to Louisiana, or we did this and we did that. And you really need to go further. And you really need to, if you can't get on a plane, do your research to look at what we do, how we do it, and maybe it's not always a comparison. This is this because this is like this. This is just like this. Time has passed. Maybe we should look at the interconnectivity of what we do, of where it began. It's now 2023. You can't talk about this is the same thing they're doing there. No, it's not. We've been here for how long? And in the process of being here, we creolized our culture. That was another thing. I had to really understand what the word Creole meant. It had nothing to do with my French ancestry, which, by the way, I don't have any. It's okay. But, when we talk about the creolization or being Creoles, how about what we created? How about what we saved? How about our will to survive and create something new in this environment? And we use the word because we were colonized, we were enslaved, we spoke French, whatever, and then turned it to Creole. By the way, Louisiana Creole, which I'm studying. I'm not good at it, but
I love it. Yeah, I don't get me started on the language because less struggle is all I can say. But either way, no, I think this is important. The ability to adapt, to create manifestations, and you have to also remember, as you know, all the different groups that were coming to Louisiana, well, to the Americas, period. You have people coming from what's the Congo Kingdom, from Senegambia, and you have different ways of moving and how those things emerge to be what is being done in Louisiana is unique. It's amazing because
people came from throughout Africa, and we don't want to talk about that. And also, that word, Africa, is great. During the time of our enslavement, I don't think Africans from the different regions throughout Africa and the different ethnic groups identified themselves as African. I think they identified as the nation they were from.
They did.
Yes, they were from, I'm this, I'm that, and it's okay. So that's why I'm saying we really need to, and yes, some things were the same because of the geographic area that we lived in, but some things were different. So, if you were a Mendy, you were a Mendy. You were a Mendy, you were not a Fula.
Right.
You were not,
I was thinking the same thing. Those specific groups. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're definitely gonna be some things that are overarching, right? Like
the interconnectivity of it. Yes.
Right. Yes. But yes, they're gonna be variants, right? And I think that is what makes what happened in the diaspora so powerful. When I travel back and forth, as I'm sure you can relate, back and forth to Senegal, and when I'm there, I'm constantly, researching, not just arts, but just, my personal family history or my individual, let me say my family history for myself, like that. And I'm always thinking about, wow, like, they identify as Senegalese. I can't identify as that. I mean, my people left there before Senegal was it was the Jollof, and, it was different names, right? Kabu Kingdom, and you had the Mali Empire. So I don't identify as a Senegalese, although I know a lot of my ancestry is from present day Senegal. But moving on with the point, I'm thinking about, of course, I definitely identify as an African, so I'm not going to deny that. But for me to identify as an individual modern day nation I can't do that because I don't identify with that. But when we look at my personal or my ancestry, I'm always immersed in like that. Like, okay, so I'm like, okay, so I'm Mandinka, and then I'm also Fula or Pool, and I'm also Balanta, and I'm literally thinking about all these things. I'm Temne, and these people are all from the same area, like Mali and Senegal and Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea. They're all from the same area, so I'm over here like that's a lot to come to terms with, and that's just some of the groups of all of them. But I think that is what makes our tradition so rich, is that the people that we are today individually make up multitudes of groups as individual families. Because I'm thinking about my ancestry is a combination of my father's and my mother's, like all of us, but it's like probably 10 groups per person.
Exactly.
Like literally. So then
exactly.
You pulling all this in, and this is why I believe our culture is so rich. And I think that that's a powerful thing for us to really tap into. But at the same time, we have to recognize how much we don't know, because there's so much to know about each group and so many dances from each group. Like one group has how many dances, right? So we're not going to know all the dances necessarily, but to be able to say, hey, you said something in my film that you were featured in that I thought was really important. You're saying it's not necessarily about comparing the dances always, but it's about understanding that they're African in essence, or in the way that they're being created, or the way that they're being shared. And I just thought that was so important. It's not necessarily just okay, are you doing the exact same step? Although there are similarities in that, right? But it's beyond that, and we have to go deeper. And you have gone deep,
And one of the things we don't realize as African Americans, yes, we do appreciate, we do love, we do respect, we do want to learn. So therefore, we're learning African dance, we're presenting African dance. Basically, we're presenting a form of African dance for the concert stage. That's what we're doing. So when you go into the community in Africa, we know something. We know some steps, but something about it may change. We have the basic steps. And if you're from New Orleans or maybe anywhere else, we have it in our hearts and in our minds to improvise. By way, now I am going to compare. I laugh
Come
when
on,
I
get
hear
into it.
So New Orleans, and one of our big traditions is the second line. All right. When you go to a second line, whatever step you do, you do. Nobody's going to stop you and say, that step is right. Oh, you do it? No, only if you're off the music. only if you're not dancing with the rhythm. But if you live here, that movement is within us. So, and if you come to New Orleans, you're gonna do it. You can't seldom can you take a second line class because we don't. You're looking at me like. So, it's the same thing. You come here, you go to a class or you go to a club and somebody's showing you something, and you do it, and it's freer here because I would think that if you're in Africa, for certain traditions, no, not even if it's a ritual, if you don't belong in that circle, you're not participating, you're not going to get up and dance. It's not for you. It's not your time or your place. And we know that. Like if you're not masking, if it's no, it's not for you. Not at this time. Maybe after he passes, or she, whoever it is, because we don't know. But you're not going to jump in the middle when the mask is there. I mean, am I right or wrong?
You are definitely right. You're definitely right. You're definitely right. And this is why you're here. And so I wanna transition a little bit to talk about some of the specific dances that you cover in your book, because I know you look a lot at like South Louisiana, from like the southeast in New Orleans area to the southwest, going Lafayette, Lake Charles. So some of those dances you cover you talk about, I believe there's a second line. It's been a while because somebody let me borrow the book and I had to give it back. So I'm still waiting on my real copy, but that's okay. I'm gonna let you make it. So the okay, I'm waiting. Second, I want this time. Second line you cover bounce, you look at the Easter Rock and Zydeco. And so can you talk a little bit about, I think you kind of covered second line, but let's move on to maybe let's talk about the Easter Rock, because I think that one is maybe not as well known to the most of the audience. So what is the Easter Rock? What region is it from? Mm-hmm.
So I'll break it down. Louisiana is different from the other states in the United States. Your state, the geographical regions, are divided as counties. In Louisiana, we're divided as parishes. So I looked at the dance from the parishes, what geographic parishes, and what's traditional. So below I-10, that's where the traditional dance forms are done, except in Northeast Louisiana, which is where Easter Rock comes from. Easter Rock is basically a ring shout tradition. Traditionally, it is done the Saturday before Easter Sunday. We might look at the interconnection of it being how we creolized an African tradition, the enslaved Africans being now made Christian, because in Louisiana, that was the official religion. If you had enslaved people, They were not allowed to practice their own tradition. They had to be Christians. Because of where Southeast Louisiana is, that was the time of American control. So you talk about that religion being a Protestant religion, unlike the rest of Louisiana. So Easter Rock is a traditional religion, a practice from the Christian religion of a Protestant standpoint, not Catholicism. As a ring shout, it's done in a circle. You move in an African tradition in a counterclockwise direction. As a ritual or as a tradition, the step does not change. It's the same movement throughout. It starts slow as a procession with one song when the saints go marching in, and then it moves to a faster pace, and it's basically a 3-step movement from the right to the left. Everyone's moving in a circle around a table. That table represents what we have, our offering to each other. So cakes are on the table, things of that nature, and juices that we can share after the service. There is a banner that is held at the beginning of the procession when the congregants come in. The banner is moved forward and back. Now, what's interesting is you had some scholars saying the banner is a cross. Well, if you're in a rural area or anywhere, it's really easy to take 2 sticks and make a cross. The banner has always been done as a banner, either, and basically a circular design with items coming off of it in terms of decoration. I'm saying decoration, but decoration, I don't like to use the word decoration because that, as I'll read, it narrows it or it diminishes the value. So it's an artistic embellishment is the word that the banner, the circular banner is in, and it's moving front and it's moving back as the congregants are doing the 1, 2, 3 to the right, 1, 2, 3 to the left. There may be a stop where it's a pulsation, and then you move again. There's no other steps. At the end of the service, then the rest of us who have been observing, we're allowed to participate in the ring shout. And it is a religious ceremony. Now, the members of that community who participate and who have carried that Easter Rock tradition, they are invited to present it. I say present because it is religious at different events around the country. And I think it's a great thing. And I would say that Louisiana, outside of the eastern coast of the United States, northeast Louisiana, Winsboro is the city, is the only place where a ring shout tradition is still being practiced. So that's Easter Rock. If we move to the other side of the state, southwest Louisiana, before we get to the New Orleans side, southwest Louisiana and the bayou areas, the tradition of the dance is called Zydeco. Zydeco can happen in 2 different ways. One, it can follow just a basic 1, 2, 3, and whether you call it a waltz or whatever, it's a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's a slower movement. Now, the thing about it is, someone once asked me that I want you to help me prove that the Cajuns got the 1, 2, 3 from the Zydicos. And of course, we know the difference between someone who's a Cajun, someone who identifies as a Cajun, and someone who identifies as a Creole. Cajuns are white people, descendants of people from Canada who were expelled from Canada when the British took over because they needed them to pledge allegiance to the British, and these people wanted to hold their allegiance to the French. They left, they came to places where French was spoken. Those people are Cajuns. They're from Acadiana, Acadian. I hope I'm pronouncing
You're
it
spelling it right.
correctly.
Acadiana,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So they have their musical, their whole cultural practice. Creoles are people of African descent who live throughout. Well, we're talking about Louisiana now, so we're just talking about who live in Louisiana. Creoles could live around the world. I'm going to break a little while and say Creoles in Africa. It means something different. It means those Africans who were maybe taken from, let's say, Sierra Leone. And when the British captured the ship, because now slavery wasn't beneficial to them, so they're stopping the enslavement of Africans. They stop a ship filled with enslaved or captured people from Sierra Leone, and you drop them off in the Gambia. That has nothing, they're not from the Gambia. They don't know those traditions. They don't speak the language. They've got to adapt. So now the word for those people are Creoles. It's nothing to do with being French. So, but anyway, in Louisiana, we took it. Okay, we're colonized by the French, and some of us had relationships, whether they were forced or not, by those plantation owners or maybe by the Cajuns. But Cajuns tended to separate themselves. They were petite farmers. They didn't own large scale plantations.
Right.
So anyway, here
well,
we
at least
are.
In the beginning, at least in the beginning, they didn't.
Yeah. Here we are. We're creating a culture in Southwest Louisiana of our own. What's different from it? From the Cajuns? Remember, we're enslaved Africans. What's different is the beat and the heart and the soul of it. When you hear that music, you hear the ancestry of the Domas. When I say Doma, I'm using that word now, the truth tellers in West Africa, the Jellies in West Africa. We hear the wails, we hear the tone, the intonation of how they sing, how, it has nothing to do with French. And that beat, there's a beat that happens with Zydeco music. So therefore, we're not doing that waltz, which getting back to the woman who asked me about proving that the Cajuns got the waltz from the Creoles, and as humans, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I think 1, 2, 3 is a rhythm that's used around the world by every culture, every race, everything. Girl, I'm not going to waste my time trying to prove that to you. You could go to some place in Pakistan and find somebody doing 1, 2, 3. It may not swing out like the Cajuns, but they're doing 1, 2, 3. But anyway, so the Zydeco dancers or the Creoles, they have the Zydeco dance, and it became a popular or a social dance form, right? So you may see it in different forms: 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, and slide and duck and turn and rock and whatever. And the 1, 2, 3 becomes a traditional form. Like at some point in a communal dance, somebody's going to play the waltz, and we're going to know what to do. And so when we go further south to New Orleans, I like to call the traditions that we do our parade traditions and social dance traditions. The parade traditions cover the aspect of what happens during Carnival or anything related to Carnival. So parade traditions, whether it's Mardi Gras Indians, whether it's baby dolls, whether Oh, and we need to get back to Northeast Louisiana, because when we talk about parade traditions, we cannot leave this conversation without talking about the HBCU tradition. And if
And
we
I meant,
talk
and
about
I have that point. I was going to remind you. We have in
the H,
Southern and
yes, and why is that important? So let's finish this New Orleans. The parade traditions and our communal traditions, yes, all of that comes from who we are as a people, how we related and interacted with each other in these communal spaces. And the evolution of it is now our answer to what happened 50 years ago in America. That's the hip hop tradition. And so our hip hop tradition, yes, some people do hip hop, but then if you're New Orleans, we turn everything. We follow the bounce tradition, the bounce beat and rhythm, which, by the way, when we're talking about the connectivity of it, I think that came from a DJ in New York. Okay, let's move on. Again, the interconnectivity. What did we do with it? It became us. But moving
and even
to
with and even I want to make a quick point before we move on to the HBCU tradition, because it's very important. That is important, and I want to just do a quick tangent to bring, and I'm gonna bring it right back. When we even look at the conversation around hip hop, hip hop as a cultural manifestation. We know it's coming out of the Bronx. But when you start to think about the different aspects of hip hop, right? So you have the breakdance, and you have the graffiti, you have the MCing, the DJing. Like when you start to look at the rap, for example, when you think about the early years, that is very Southern influence. And when I say Southern, Black Southern influence,
our
James
radio
Brown.
disc jockeys.
Right. And
Our
James
radio
Brown,
disc jockeys were rapping on the radio station.
that's my dad said that. I remember, matter of fact, I had when I was in Sunday school, I grew up Catholic, so they called it CCE. So I remember one of our CCE teachers, he was actually from New Orleans, and he said, that's the stuff we used to do at home, just the mixing, on the turntables, but the rapping as well. My dad even said that as well. But I'm even thinking about how James Brown, being from the South, was heavily sampled and just used in early hip hop, and the fact that people have been rapping. There's actually an author from Houston who wrote a book. I forget the name of it, but the author's name is Mako Fanil, and he wrote a book about the early years of rap in Houston. And he had a lecture about 10 years ago, and he brought some of the earlier rappers, and they were talking about, and I'm like, it makes sense because this is something Black people do, period. I think to say that it's something that's only done in that only people in New York did, it doesn't make any sense, because if you think about the people who formed hip hop in New York, where those people come from, some of them, yeah, maybe from New York, but maybe their parents were from North Carolina, or maybe their parents were from Jamaica, or their parents were from Dominican Republic. So you have these three types of Black diasporas meeting in a place in one particular location that creates this whole tradition of hip hop. But when you start to look at the elements, you're like, no, this is an interconnectivity. This is all of us sharing and exchanging tradition.
Our experience, yes. Because that's what our art does. It's the expression of our experiences here. And so when I'm saying bounce in New York, I was only talking about the Triggerman beat. But we did it. We created it, not only the music, but the dance. And unfortunately, like everything else, it was commercialized and sexualized. Because remember, the dance was always done in community. So children doing this, they weren't looking at it like, oh, I'm twerking, this is some sexual thing. No, that's not what it was. And actually, twerk was something, twerk actually meant how I'm gonna work this. Now somebody start using the word, and then all of a sudden, again, I'm gonna get to that when I read my final thing. We took it, we accepted it, but it wasn't that always, and then when you're dealing with it from a sexual manner, it was another word that was more explicit than twerking or whatever. But getting back to the music and the dance form itself, and you're talking about New York or whatever, I'm sure like Texas, like Mississippi, like Atlanta, our bounce was an expression, our answer to what was commercialized in the east on the East Coast. It was about first. It was just about fun. There was something called "Get on the Bus," the Double Dutch Bus, and then it became political. Right, the West Coast, it became something else, and then it became this gangster thing. We're in New Orleans. We party, baby. We can talk about social political things, but we party. So this is our answer to what was going on in the 80s, how our communities were being infiltrated, how the educational system was maybe declining, but how we're still trying to hold on and identify ourselves, that crime that was going on, and whatever. This is what we created. It was also how we answered and identified ourselves, because while that hip hop was being developed and held and commercialized, jazz was too. So therefore, the prodigy of New Orleans jazz, they were being heralded as the next great musicians. The difference is jazz. So now they're from a different socioeconomic and educational class that our bounce artists were not from. So yeah, okay, you can go on. You're great. You're wonderful. But this is what we're gonna do here. And so nothing against it. We did what we needed to do. Everybody was self-identifying. But when we talk about the social political function and environment of our dance and our music, excuse me 1 second. And we talk about the dancing dolls and the HBCU dancing tradition. The reality of it is, why do we have HBCUs in the first place? It all boils back to the same thing. Our survival. The HBCUs were created because they didn't want, the authority, Europeans, not Europeans, European Americans, white people in America didn't want us in school with their children. So HBCUs were created. Now, the interesting thing about Southern is it's a great example of our evolution politically and consciously as who we are. That whole marching band tradition started with a man, I think he was from Alabama, James Reese Europe. And then that marching band tradition happened because he took that staunch march tradition and said, no, we're going to play this music how we play it in our neighborhoods. Right. And we're going to do a dance and we're going to do this. He did that. And then the HBCU tradition evolved from that, because those same men who were in the military during that time, who then moved to our universities and college, then taught it or instilled in the band what they were taught, right? Through the lessons and the work of James Reese Europe. The dance came about, and however it came about, it was good. But what happened was, when it started in Baton Rouge, the capital of Louisiana, and we're talking about classism again, not the dance, but how they identified. They identified as Southern belles.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No.
We know the connotation of a Southern belle. These are Black women at a Black school, and you're going to call yourself a Southern belle. The connotation of it is wrong. So what happens next as we move on through history? And it's the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement and the Black arts movement and the protests on Southern's campus. The light bulb went off. Oh, well, I guess we can't be Southern belles. I'm glad I wasn't there, but I'm glad it happened. And the director, the woman who was chosen to be the director, said, you know, we dance. We're going to dance, and we're beautiful. All of us are beautiful. We're dancing dolls. And not only are we all beautiful, I know it's the South, but guess what? Every pigmentation that we are is going to be represented on this group, in this group, rather. Every pigmentation and every body, not every body, but every body type, yes, is going to be represented on this dance team. And watch what else she did. Her name was Gracie Perkins. And when you see the pictures, the first pictures of the dancing dolls, Gracie Perkins did this, connecting it to Africa. And our heads are going to be covered. If we don't have a hat on, we're going to have, we didn't know to call it a gele. We called it turbans. We're going to wear turbans. We're going to wear head wraps. And so when you see the pictures of the early dancing dolls, they either have a head wrap on or a picture. And I'm going to give the Southern dancing dolls a little credit now. And I have a daughter who tells me I worry about the wrong things. And it has nothing to do with who we are and how we identify. But we're on the subject of hair and dance. So we knew Tina Turner was an act. Let's bring it all together. Tina Turner was an act. Come see Tina Turner. We ran, grabbed the towel, and we put the towel on our head, and we did. And after Tina Turner danced, we took the towel off, and we went, wasn't that great? Isn't she great? And we danced again. Southern University's dancing dolls, they took that towel off, whether it's their own hair or something sewn in, it comes to their shoulders. It's not longer. It's not down their back. And it's not, it's just like, wait, what happened? And one or two of them even had hair like ours. And so without saying more, I don't know how we would edit this or how we would make this better. I'm happy to
this is
record it again or whatever. But, you know, yeah, look at, pull up. I hope your editor's able to pull up a picture of the present day dancing dolls and compare it to other dance groups. Not other dance groups, but other Black dance groups. What are we saying about ourselves?
And what beauty standards are being set? Or maintained, for that matter.
Yes. And why?
Absolutely.
I would like to read something.
Yeah,
if you don't mind. All right. So this is a piece from the new work, Naked Appearances. This is 2 sections from the essay. The essay is entitled Ode to New Orleans. It starts with this poem. We eat and dance and eat again. We pray and cuss, honoring our mothers. We think and work and dream harder. This is New Orleans. We have Nanans and Parans. We call spirits by names. This is New Orleans. We sing and kiss. Hey now, hello, bye-bye, see you later. We wear cute outfits. When we speak, because we don't talk, our words and our bodies dance. You heard me? This is New Orleans. We cook good. We be fine, got big asses and some fine, huh? We are Creoles, African Americans, never been to Africa, blue blood Black. This is New Orleans. We have knowledge, sometimes without knowing. We cut deep into our souls, our hearts, our memories. You talked about a dance and the romanticism, and we talk about Congo Square in New Orleans.
Mm.
And yes, it's there, but we don't talk about what else happened in Congo Square. Like after the um, slavery was outlawed, the Emancipation Proclamation, how we met in Congo Square for a march. The city,
Mm.
yes, we don't
Mhm.
talk about how those
Mhm.
people who were the free people did that. No, we're not doing that. This is what we want to do. We talk about Congo Square in New Orleans sometimes like that was the only place that we were allowed to meet. If you lived in Southwest or Southeast or East Baton Rouge Parish and Sunday was your day off, you did not travel to New Orleans to dance in Congo Square.
Right.
You danced or gathered where you were. And that's a misnomer. Misnomer. People say, oh, because the law allowed us to dance on Sundays. No, the Black Code said don't work on Sundays. Don't work your enslaved person. It
Right.
didn't say this law is designed so that they could dance on Sunday. That's not what the Black Code said. And the Black Code was wherever the French people were in authority. It wasn't
Right.
just in New Orleans. So, but and so now they hailed this dance called bambula, and that's how that professor at Howard cut me down and made me know and understand. But here we go.
Yes.
In New
Talk about
Orleans,
the bambula. I don't know how I almost forgot to bring up the bambula.
here's the bambula. This is what I have to say about the bambula. Excuse me, I'm going to read it. In New Orleans, our Blackness is celebrated in dance. It is our open declaration of self-acceptance. It was and remains the artistic expression of our refusal to submit to both the European and American denigration of our being. Even the American cultural amalgamation and African Protestant yoke, migrant in itself, did not end our creativity despite all efforts to dissuade us from self expression. From the cultural paradigm, specifically dance in New Orleans, we confronted Americana before and after the Confederacy through our artistic genres by the self-prescribed mandate to remember. Bambula means to remember. It was never a dance or a rhythm from any of the nations from which we were captured. Use of the word did not, nor does not smooth the horrors of Louisiana's social structure based on the enslavement of Africans and its profitable sugar industry. Remember, nigger was the word assigned to our humanity. They just gave us that word. Just as we practice a spirituality derived from those same African belief systems, here we go, people are going to get mad. Those same African belief systems, 100 years before the Haitian Revolution, or the expulsion of those Haitians from Cuba, which brought them to Louisiana in the first place because they didn't want to be under a Black person, we remembered, we honored, and we evolved our cultural memories through our arts. We know how the story, the truth ends.
It's powerful. And the part about this, the Haitian Revolution, and I was actually, it's funny, a lot of what you have been saying on today's episode, I've recently been saying, and someone sent me, one of my former classmates sent me a video of someone on Instagram who was talking about the Haitian Revolution and just like its impact. And also she mentioned in explaining it, how there was this, revolts, the German, coast uprising is what they call it, outside of New Orleans. Well, maybe about an hour, like in Vacherie area, Vacherie and Edgard area. And anyway, she was talking about that revolt, and she mentioned that by contextualizing it from the Haitian Revolution. And I told him, I was like, yes, the Haitian Revolution is very important to discuss its impact and its influence and how it influenced certain things. But what I don't like is how we so often paint that as well, it is exceptional in that the fact that they won, right? Like the fact that they were able to successfully revolt an entire island or free an entire island, right? But the idea of revolting is not unique, right? And they didn't need some Africans from another location to inspire them for their own freedom. And I think that was kind of my annoyance, that we assumed that was exceptional in the fact that no other African person, no other enslaved person wanted freedom, or that they were willing to revolt. And it's like all these revolutions or all these revolts, they took place from small scale to large scale on a regular, continuous basis, wherever enslaved people were, period. But
right.
my point,
and before the Haitian Revolution.
Right. But that's what I'm saying, before. And so, and my point in saying that, and this is not to undermine what happened with them, but my point in saying that is we have to be really mindful to respect the various manifestations that do exist, right? I love to say that we are all African people, because I do believe that we all are, but I think we should also respect the individual communities as well, and their specific histories and things that have happened. Because I think when we begin to do that, we can kind of underestimate even our possibilities of what we did in the past and what we could do in the future. And bringing this to dance, I hear a lot about, oh, we do have a Caribbean influence in Louisiana. This is not a fallacy. But there were already languages being spoken. There were already dances being danced before there was after the Haitian Revolution happened. Like we didn't need that to contribute to what Black people were already doing.
We were already dancing.
Exactly.
So, we were already dancing. We were already practicing our religion, and so what those Haitians did was they came in and solidified a francophone cultural perspective. As Africans, when did the first African ship arrive? Not the first African ship. Please don't put that. The first ship. The first official, because they brought us here before.
Yes.
Natchitoches was older. Though we were already here. So we need to look at when that first shipment from Europe, European shipment arrived. So those people just forgot everything?
No.
They just forgot everything and they just waited for the Haitians to come? And every time new people came, we just forgot everything. We didn't know what to do. And then you have to look at what the ones that came to New Orleans, they weren't trying to be African.
Right.
That was the people
who were free people of color. And a lot of them wanted to disassociate from that whole perspective, because in Haiti or Haiti, they were already doing that. A lot of them, they were actually, and so I'm glad you're saying this, because it's not that people generalize it a lot, and it undermines the cultural legacy, the artistic practices of Louisiana, and it just doesn't tell the full or the truth, period. And I think I even in my dissertation, I talk about how many of us came straight from Africa, because I hear, okay, so let me backtrack, because I know I'm going on a tangent, but it's important. I hear a lot of times people are more comfortable with calling something Caribbean, calling something Afro-Caribbean, than they are with calling it African, or to say that people came from Africa. I interviewed somebody for a different project, and he said, oh, this is a Caribbean influence. But I'm like, where did those Caribbean people come from before they came from? Were they Taino? Were they Arawak? No, you're talking about the Black people of the Caribbean. So let's be mindful of where they originated from, just to be clear. But I think sometimes we have a tendency to overestimate or over articulate that presence. And don't get me wrong, it is there. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist, right? Because it is there. But at what point did it come? And what was happening before it came and after, right? And I was telling people, I'm like, you do realize New Orleans was a port, is a port. St. Martinville is a port where people came directly from Africa. They didn't always stop. Let's come get some people in Haiti and then bring them here. It didn't work like that. So
Right.
we have like, that's just not how it happened. So it's not to, and this is not to like, I'm not trying to be divisive, right? I want us to understand those nuances, because when we look at our traditions, the nuances, we have similarities, right? But there's some nuances that we have to really clarify, and we have to go deeper with, as you have been saying, so that we can really protect our cultural manifestations, especially when
here's the thing. If the first slave ship arrived in Louisiana in 1719, were we just sitting there on a rock waiting for Haitians to come to teach us to dance, to teach us to pray in an African-based religion, using an African-based spirit? Let me say that again. If the first slave no, I can't talk.
You got it. Go ahead.
Okay, let me do it. I think we have to be very careful when we're talking about the influence of Haitian culture on African American culture in Louisiana after the Haitian Revolution. If the first slave ship, official slave ship, arrived in Louisiana in 1719, now we're not even talking about the Africans who were brought here unofficially.
Right, exactly.
Because we were here before that through slavery. We were here through slavery. But the first slave ship was bought in 1719, and they continued thereafter. It does not make sense that we had to wait for expats from Haiti to come here to teach us African-based dance.
And not just wait for a year or 30 days, for
100 years. 100 years.
Right, exactly.
To teach us how to dance, to teach us how to follow an African-based spirituality.
Right.
To teach us how to
speak and how to
teach us how to speak.
What language
that just doesn't make sense. And I like Haiti. I love Haiti.
Of course.
The similarities
there are sisters. There are family, but it's not.
And I've forgotten it, because let's give the French some credit. They kept good records. The first enslaved child born in Louisiana was before 1719. So how did that child get here? The first enslaved child was born in Louisiana before 1719. I don't understand it. And when I hear people say, oh, and it's the same, the architecture, I was like, so can you go to other places in the Caribbean and see that same architecture there? And I
it's important. So I want to, because I know we kind of went on a tangent, but I think it's important because it gives the context of the peoples who created the traditions in Louisiana, especially in South Louisiana, but also in Northern Louisiana, who created the traditions of dance that we still have. And in naming, because I want to wrap up in a second, but in naming these groups, you have people coming from all over the continent, but you have a predominance of people coming from Senegambia area, right? And when I say Senegambia, I'm also going to include Mali, which is north of Senegal, Okay, and I'm also going to include Guinea-Bissau, and the Congo region. What are you gonna?
Yeah.
Of course, the
I was
Congo.
going to
Yeah,
talk about most of,
yes. Well, in New Orleans, there was more of a Congo influence
yes.
than in Southwest Louisiana, definitely. But that influence is definitely there. And I mean, you can see. I mean, these things are there's still evidence. It's not like it's something that was just of the past. There's still very clear evidence, especially with the practices around carnival in New Orleans. That is evident, right? Even names, right? Angola. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but Angola Penitentiary, Congo Square. I mean, there's a lot of evidence. And also like in Southwest Louisiana, there was much more of a Senegambia, much more of a Senegambia, and less of that the Congo presence, but nonetheless still there. Because I know even me personally, I have roots from what was the Congo Kingdom, even though my family is from the Lafayette area. But this is not to say there weren't other Africans there, right? You have people with the last name Igbo who are from present day Nigeria and Cameroon. You have people who came from, I have an ancestor who came from Mauritius. Matter of fact, the record I have of I want to say he's my fourth great grandfather. He was bought, he was sold, well, bought and sold and bought um, in New Orleans in early 1800s. So it had to be 1801 before Louisiana purchased because it was a legal record. Probably 1801 with his mother and his sister by a French woman in New Orleans. The record has the whole city on there and her name on there, Marie Latour. And they came all the way from Mauritius, which is in the, East Africa and the Indian Ocean. So it's not to say that, you know, people didn't come from other places, but it's just to say that the cultural presence is dominated by certain groups or certain regions from Africa. And those being that Congo region and that Senegambia presence. But I know we're super nerdy. We have a lot of research to share, but I want to wrap up. I want to, first of all, thank you just for your immense intentionality around the subject matter, and not being afraid to discuss difficult topics. I think that is something we should really lean more into, especially in the Louisiana area. I mean, I grew up in Texas, I grew up in Houston, but my whole cultural understanding comes from Louisiana, being that my people are from there, and I know firsthand that that is a very touchy, difficult topic for us. More so, I would say more so than other Black Americans to a certain extent. I would go out on a limb and say I've seen more of it with us because of the way that our history has happened and the way that our narratives are constructed. So thank you for doing that work and continuing to
Thank
do
you.
that, and for sharing your writing with us. Her book, I want everybody to look it up. I know she's going to be sharing more in a second. Black Dance in Louisiana, Guardian of a Culture, correct? Because I had
Correct.
Guardian of a Culture. I'm remembering off the top of my head. A very important work where she goes into more detail about all these traditions. So I want to give you the chance to share your upcoming work and then anything else you have coming up, events, and how people can connect with you. So whether that's Instagram or Facebook or your website, how can they stay in touch and keep up with your work?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. This was wonderful. Well, I can be contacted. My website is Vinedance. The exclamation mark is VYINDANSE. That's Louisiana Creole for come dance. The website you can reach, that's the website. You can reach me by emailing Tekrema, TEKREMA center, one word, at gmail.com. The book we actually sold out. We'll have more in January. It's Black Dance in Louisiana, Guardian of a Culture, and it'll be re-released with the release of the new work called Naked Appearances. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm excited. I want to be the first. I'm in the first in line because I've been waiting on this book since like at least I want to say at least 2020 or early 2021. So I am excited for your new work, for the other book as well. So thank you so much again. And
Thank you.
thank you to our listeners. Be sure to connect with us as well as with Ms. Greer, but connect with us at Dance Africana Dance Podcast. You can do so by following us on Instagram. Our Instagram is Dance Africana with a K. And our website is danceafricana.com. And to all my Africana people, do not forget to dance. Thank you.